Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where your comfy bed is suddenly swapped for a creaky stool in a freezing, candlelit office. The streets outside are jammed with chanting crowds, the smell of unwashed bodies mixes with roasting chestnuts, and your quill hand is already cramping before the workday even begins. We're heading into revolutionary France, not as a dashing hero, but as the least glamorous role imaginable, a clerk. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the muddy cobblestones of Paris in 1793, boots leaking and coat thin against the damp morning air. Around you, posters with bold lettering shout slogans about liberty, equality, and fraternity. One of them has been pasted over 3 times in just a week, each decree cancelling the last. Your job: copy every single one into official registers as though permanence can be faked with ink on cheap paper. Already you sense this will be impossible. Inside the government building, the air is sour with sweat, candle wax, and ink. You take your seat at a desk so worn that grooves from the last poor clerk's quill still scar the wood. Stacks of paper tower around you, lists of grain deliveries, names of suspected traitors, petitions from citizens begging for justice. Each sheet feels like a live coal. Copy it wrong, misplace it, or fail to stamp it properly, and you could be accused of sabotage. Historians still argue whether clerks like you were more terrified of the mobs outside or the supervisors behind them. The first order of business is bread. Always bread. Paris lives and dies on loaves, and you're expected to record every flour shipment. Trouble is, there isn't enough to go around. Out the window, you glimpse a line of women with baskets, voices sharp as they demand to know why prices rise while their children starve. One woman shakes her fist and yells that someone in this very office must be hoarding records, or worse, food. Your quill stutters. Imagine being blamed for missing baguettes you've never even seen. And here's a quirky tidbit. Clerks in this era often had to bring their own quills, sharpened by hand with tiny knives. If yours snapped during a heated meeting, you couldn't just grab another from the supply closet. You had to beg or borrow, sometimes carving a makeshift nib from a goose feather plucked that morning. The revolution may shout about liberty, but your wrist screams about tendinitis. Your superior, a wiry man with ink stains on his cuffs and eyes darting like a hunted rabbit, leans close and whispers, "Write faster." His breath smells of cheap wine. Every delay, every blotch could be seen as deliberate. You nod, though your heart pounds. Already names blur, decrees run together, and dates slip from your grasp. You picture the Committee of Public Safety calling you in, accusing you of mixing up a shipment of flour with a list of suspects. In this world, clerical errors are criminal acts. Outside, a drumbeat grows louder. You peek again. Soldiers march by, bayonets gleaming, escorting prisoners toward the guillotine. The crowd roars with a hunger that has nothing to do with bread. You press harder with your quill, as though neat handwriting might shield you from the chaos. But deep down you know it won't. Your candle sputters in the draft. You lick your finger, pinch the wick lower, and keep scrawling. Your desk neighbor mutters about lost inkpots, suspicious glances, and the creeping paranoia that seeps into every corner of the office. Already, you're learning that the revolution isn't just fought with muskets. It's fought with scraps of paper, and you're stuck in the middle of the battlefield armed only with blotting sand. The weight of the city presses in, The mob outside demanding justice, the leaders inside demanding efficiency, and the gnawing certainty that no human could meet both demands. You feel your back ache, your eyes burn, and the slow realization dawns that you won't last a day, not because you lack courage, but because courage means nothing when the paperwork itself could be your death sentence. Your fingers are already stiff, blotched with ink, and you haven't even made it to noon. The stack of papers on your desk seems taller than you remember, and each page bristles with accusations, decrees, and lists that feel like snakes coiled in black ink. Outside, the market bell clangs, and a familiar roar rolls through the window shutters. The bread queues. You might think the city's biggest drama would be kings losing their heads, but no. The true heartbeat of Paris is bread. If it doesn't show up, riots do. You dip your quill, careful not to splatter, because the supervisor insists every line be crisp. The ledger in front of you is a nightmare of numbers. Sacks of flour in, loaves baked, carts dispatched. You scrawl furiously, but the figures don't add up. They never do. The truth is, shipments vanish between the docks and the bakeries. Everyone knows some of it is skimmed by soldiers, some swallowed by corrupt officials, and some just disappears into the black hole of revolutionary chaos. You copy anyway, hand aching, because pointing out the gaps could be suicide. Historians still argue whether these shortages were more about genuine scarcity or deliberate manipulation by opportunists. Either way, you're the unlucky one who has to record it, and every number is a potential trap. One digit too many, someone might accuse you of inflating supply. Too few, you're starving the people on paper. And that makes you an enemy of the people, at least until tomorrow when the rules change again. Around mid-morning, a man in a patched coat barges in. He slaps down a folded note stamped with wax, demanding you copy it immediately into the official record. His eyes glint with the satisfaction of pulling rank. You unfold the sheet. It's barely legible, a scrawl claiming a bakery in the Marais has hidden sacks of flour. You sigh inwardly. Another denunciation. They arrive like clockwork. Jealous neighbors, disgruntled employees, even bitter ex-lovers tattling on each other to gain favor. You copy the complaint carefully, quill scratching, knowing it could ruin a baker's life. For all you know, the poor man's only crime is baking a crust that tastes too good. And then come the bribes. Oh yes, you didn't expect that part. The same baker might shuffle in later, palms sweaty, whispering that if you just misplace a page or shuffle a denunciation to the bottom of the pile, he'll ensure you have fresh bread for your family. The temptation is real. After all, your dinner last night was a thin soup that barely filled the bowl. But you know better. Accept once, and someone else will denounce you for corruption. Decline, and you might starve. Either way, you're doomed. But you force a weak smile and slide the papers into the growing mountain. Here's a quirky tidbit. The revolution loved paperwork so much that quills became a minor black market item. Goose feathers were easy enough to come by, but good ones, long, strong, and pliant, were guarded like treasure. Some clerks sharpened the same quill down to a nub, scribbling until their fingers cramped around what looked like a toothpick. Imagine your modern ballpoint pen being so rare you'd cradle it like a newborn. You rub your temples, listening to the muffled roar from outside. The bread line has turned into a protest. Women pound on the bakery shutters with rolling pins. You picture the chaos spreading, the crowd spilling through the streets, chanting for justice, chanting for food. Inside, your superior snaps at you to keep writing, as if ink can quiet hunger. The bribery isn't just food, either. One desperate man offers you a pair of boots, another a flask of strong brandy. A soldier leaves half a smoked sausage on your desk. half a sausage, as if it's worth more than gold. You can't even eat it without arousing suspicion. You push it back toward him, smiling nervously, and he shrugs as though you've sealed your fate. Your quill scratches, blotting sand dusts your pages, and all the while your stomach twists with hunger. The irony is painful. You're the one recording food flows, yet your own belly gnaws empty. The revolution insists that the people come first, but clerks are invisible, cogs that spin the machine, greased by fatigue and fear. The hours drag. You think about how absurd it is. France is tearing down monarchs, rewriting society, but you're drowning in ink and grain tallies. The candle flame gutters low, and you wonder whether you should have just opened a tavern instead. At least then, your biggest worry would be watered wine instead of being denounced for a crooked column of numbers. When the bell rings again, the bread riot has escalated. You can hear shouts of "down with hoarders," and a window smashes somewhere nearby. Your supervisor doesn't even look up. He just hisses, "Keep writing." And so you do, knowing every stroke is both shield and noose, every ledger a fragile wall against the fury of the people and the suspicions of the state. The candle smoke clings to your clothes, your lungs, even your hair, and yet you keep scribbling because you know that stopping, even to cough, might draw the wrong eyes. By now, you've realized something chilling. It isn't only your supervisor who's watching you. Everyone is. The clerks at the neighboring desks lean just a little too close, their ears twitching whenever you copy a particularly sensitive denunciation. The janitor sweeping the floor lingers suspiciously near your chair. And even when you walk home at night, you feel eyes on your back, shadows that melt away if you turn suddenly. That's because revolutionary Paris has turned surveillance into a civic duty. Spies aren't cloaked figures in dark alleys. They're your neighbors, your cousins, even the grocer who smiles while weighing your meager turnips. If you fail to cheer loudly enough at the right slogans, if your handwriting suggests hesitation when recording the name of a traitor, you could find yourself accused. Historians still argue whether paranoia truly spread from the top down, or if ordinary citizens simply seized the chaos to settle petty grudges. Either way, you can't breathe without wondering who's listening. You bend over a fresh denunciation, the script almost illegible. It accuses a woman of singing a royalist lullaby to her child. You want to laugh. What kind of crime is that? But you don't. You copy it word for word, heart thumping, because even raising an eyebrow could mark you as sympathetic to counter-revolutionary songs. And here's a strange tidbit. Some parents genuinely switched the melodies they hummed at night, terrified their infant's babbles might betray them. Imagine trying to hush a crying baby by singing patriotic anthems. Good luck getting a toddler to drift off to La Marseillaise. The worst part is how every penstroke feels like a trap. You hesitate over whether a suspect's name is spelled with one N or two, and suddenly the clerk beside you is leaning over, smiling too sweetly, asking if you made a mistake. You quickly correct it, but the smile lingers like a knife blade. What if he reports you for sabotaging the register? What if he already has? You begin to notice how language itself becomes treacherous. Words like citizen and comrade must be used flawlessly. Slipping back to monsieur or madame is enough to brand you suspiciously nostalgic for the old regime. You scratch out titles furiously, rewriting them in the approved form, terrified someone might find the crossed-out honorifics later and interpret them as coded loyalty to aristocrats. The revolution isn't only rewriting laws, it's rewriting vocabulary, and you're the one forced to proofread reality. At lunchtime, or what passes for it, you shuffle out for a crust of bread. The baker glares, suspicious of your ink-stained fingers. He lowers his voice. They say clerks are the worst spies. You sit and write all day, recording who lives and who dies. You force a laugh. though inside your stomach drops. If even bread sellers hate you, what chance do you have? Walking back, you overhear children playing. Instead of tag, they're pretending to be judges and prisoners. One kid shouts, "Guilty!" and another falls dramatically to the cobblestones. The others cheer. It's a game, but the street echo makes it feel like your future. You clutch your ledger tighter and hurry inside, telling yourself not to look like someone who hurries. Back at your desk, another denunciation arrives, this one against a fellow clerk. You freeze as you copy the accusation. He smirks when patriotic songs are sung. Your quill trembles. It's about the man who sits 3 seats down, the one who once lent you a spare quill. He glances up as though sensing your hesitation. You look back to the page, copying with exaggerated care, but guilt burns your cheeks. You wonder if he'll still be at his desk tomorrow. Even the smallest habits betray you. One evening, exhausted, you forget to pin a tricolor cockade to your hat before stepping outside. Immediately, a woman in the crowd points, shouting that you look suspicious. You mumble an excuse, fumbling the ribbon into place, heart hammering. It's such a silly object, just 3 colors of fabric, yet without it you are nothing, or worse, an enemy. The surveillance never ends. You write, you copy, you breathe carefully, and you learn the most important rule of clerkhood. Never reveal too much in your handwriting. A bold flourish might suggest arrogance. A cramped script might suggest cowardice. Even the speed of your pen can be interpreted. So you find yourself aiming for that impossible middle ground, writing just fast enough, just neat enough, just patriotic enough to survive one more day. But deep down, you know that one stray blot of ink, one slip of the tongue, one glance out the window instead of at the page could be the end. And you also know someone is waiting to report it. By the time the afternoon heat creeps into the cramped office, you're called to a new duty, scribing trials. Your legs ache from sitting or morning, yet now you must shuffle across the stone courtyard toward a hall that smells of sweat, candles, and fear. Inside, rows of benches overflow with citizens craning for a glimpse of justice or vengeance, depending on whom you ask. You clutch your ledger like a shield, knowing your job is not to think, not to feel, but simply to copy. The Revolutionary Tribunal is in session, and it moves at a speed that would make even modern traffic court look leisurely. A prisoner stumbles forward, face pale under the flicker of torches. The judge rattles off charges, hoarding grain, mocking liberty, perhaps even whispering royalist sympathies. Witnesses shout, accusations fly, and within minutes the verdict is guilty. You scribble furiously, quill scratching, trying to keep pace as the words tumble faster than your hand can move. Historians still argue whether these tribunals ever aimed at fairness or were simply political theater. But from where you sit, it feels like theater with a blade waiting in the wings. The clerk beside you nudges your elbow, whispering, "Don't miss a word." They check later. You nod, though your wrist already burns. If you omit a phrase, you risk being accused of softening a charge. If you add one, you could be blamed for exaggeration. Every syllable is a razor edge. You remember yesterday's complaint about a colleague whose handwriting was too decorative. They said it suggested secret sympathies with aristocrats. He hasn't returned to his desk since. Here's a quirky tidbit to keep you awake. Court scribes sometimes dipped their quills in diluted wine when ink ran out, leaving pale reddish trails across documents. It looked sloppy, but it was better than leaving gaps, and better than risking accusation of slowing justice. Imagine explaining to a furious judge that you paused because your inkpot was dry. You'd be lucky if your excuse didn't dry along with your head. The rhythm of trials is dizzying. Case after case shuffles through, prisoners hardly given a chance to speak. One man insists he only complained about bread prices, not liberty itself. Another swears he was humming, not singing, when someone accused him of royalist songs. You write their pleas down, but you know the verdict is already hanging above them. The audience in the gallery hisses, eager for condemnation, and you realize your quill is the only thing preserving their last words. Your stomach clenches as a woman is dragged forward, accused of feeding a priest in hiding. She denies it, then admits she gave him water once. The judge sneers, and within moments she is condemned. You scribble her name, your hand trembling, and a drop of sweat blurs the ink. You dab it quickly, terrified the smear will be seen as sabotage. Outside, the guillotine waits. You hear the distant cheer of the crowd each time justice concludes, and it makes your skin prickle. The trials may be lightning fast, but the blade is faster still. You wonder how many names you've recorded today, and whether any of them will haunt you in dreams tonight. Sometimes the pace is so brutal that the tribunal itself struggles. A witness forgets details, and the judge waves him off, saying the Republic has no time for hesitation. You jot the phrase dutifully, though your mind whispers, if hesitation is treason, then every time your quill stutters, you're already guilty. When a particularly high-profile case comes forward, the hall grows tense. A man accused of being part of a counter-revolutionary conspiracy stands tall, defiant. His speech is fiery, declaring that liberty has been twisted into tyranny. You scribble at breakneck speed, heart pounding, knowing that preserving his words might be seen as sympathy. But omitting them would also be dangerous. Someone will surely remember he spoke. So you capture each syllable, praying your ink holds out, praying your hand doesn't falter. By sunset, your pages are filled, margins crammed with cramped notes. You flex your fingers, aching, but you don't dare stop. Another prisoner shuffles forward. The judge clears his throat. You dip your quill again. Time stretches and contracts until you no longer know whether it's been hours or days. As you finally stagger from the hall, the air outside is cooler, but your head swims. The crowd has thinned, satisfied after the day's work. You press the ledger against your chest, knowing every word inside is now part of the permanent record. Yet permanence feels like a lie. People vanish overnight, papers disappear, and still the tribunal demands more. You walk back toward your desk, candlelight flickering in the windows ahead. The smell of ink awaits, the endless ledgers, the same cramped stool. Your stomach churns as you realize the trials may end for the day, but for you, the copying never does. You drag yourself back into the office, eyes gritty, wrist throbbing, but the paper mountain hasn't shrunk. If anything, it's grown taller while you were gone. Petitions, decrees, denunciations, they spill across the desk like an avalanche, threatening to bury you alive. You shuffle the pages into teetering piles, muttering under your breath that parchment weighs more than stone. The revolution promised freedom, but here you are, shackled to ink and quills. The candles flicker as drafts creep through the cracked shutters, and outside you hear the distant roll of drums. It isn't just a military march. It's the slow, steady rhythm of another execution. You picture the guillotine's blade flashing, the thud echoing through the streets, and suddenly every sheet of paper in front of you feels heavier. Every line you copy could be the reason a head rolls into a wicker basket. It's like living with the blade's shadow draped across your desk. Historians still argue whether paperwork was the revolution's most powerful weapon, or merely its byproduct. Was it the decrees themselves that held power, or the way they multiplied like rabbits, creating the illusion of unstoppable momentum? Either way, as a clerk, you're the rabbit breeder, scribbling until your knuckles seize. You wonder if someday a historian will squint at your cramped handwriting in an archive and laugh, not realizing you sweated over every word with death humming outside. The orders keep coming. Today, it's requisitions for boots. Tomorrow, it's lists of suspected hoarders, and by evening, someone dumps a stack of pamphlets demanding you copy slogans about liberty. You nearly chuckle at the irony. Your hand is too cramped to write freedom. But you quickly bite the laugh back. Laughter is dangerous here, and here's a quirky tidbit to lighten the gloom. Some clerks grew so buried under piles of paper that they literally used documents as blankets when the cold bit too hard. Imagine tucking yourself in with denunciations and decrees, muttering sweet dreams to a pile of warrants. Ink stains on your cheeks, wax seals for pillows. Romantic? Not really, mostly itchy. You rub your shoulders, listening to the murmurs of fellow clerks. One complains he hasn't seen daylight in weeks. Another mutters that his candle bill is higher than his food bill. You wonder if the revolution will issue a decree regulating candle wax next. It seems possible. After all, they've already regulated time itself with the new revolutionary calendar, erasing Sundays and inventing 10-day weeks. Your job? Copy the new dates onto every existing ledger so the past itself gets rewritten. You nearly cry thinking of the work, but you keep scratching. The sound of the guillotine carries even here. You tell yourself it's your imagination, but sometimes the cheering crowd is unmistakable. Each cheer jolts your pen, leaving little ink blots that you desperately scrape away. One too many blots, and someone might say you're careless, or worse, deliberately obscuring names. The paranoia seeps into your bones. Even the way you sand the ink feels like a performance. You pause for a sip of water, staring at the endless lists. Some petitions beg for mercy. A widow asking that her husband's name be cleared. A father pleading that his son was wrongly accused. Others are cold orders: confiscate property, seize weapons, enforce loyalty. You copy both with the same cramped hand, but inside you're torn. These are people's lives, their last desperate words, and here you are, converting them into neat columns. You wonder whether your role is noble, preserving their voices, or monstrous, facilitating their silence. The paper dust makes you sneeze, and your neighbor shoots you a sharp look. You mutter an apology, but your cheeks flush. Sneezing could be interpreted as mocking the solemn work. That's the level of madness now. Even your allergies feel like treason. The hours crawl. You dip your quill again, your inkpot nearly dry, when a courier bursts in. He slams a bundle of new decrees on your desk, muttering that they must be copied before dawn. You stare at the stack, higher than your elbow, and your body sags. Sleep is a luxury for those not chained to parchment. You stretch your aching fingers and begin again. One more scratch of quill against paper, one more brick in the fortress of bureaucracy. And yet you know this fortress is no refuge. Paper shields you from nothing. The blade outside slices through words as easily as it slices through necks. You write because you must, not because it saves you. In fact, the more you write, the more you tie yourself to a system that could topple any day. You glance at the candles, guttering low, and wonder, if the revolution drowns in its own paperwork, will you be buried first? Your eyes blur from hours of staring at cramped handwriting, so when the next assignment lands, it feels almost like a reprieve. Instead of death warrants and grain tallies, you're told to document a festival. You drag yourself into the sunlight. Yes, actual sunlight, blinking like a mole. The streets are dressed in banners of red, white, and blue, drums beating in a rhythm far cheerier than the one outside the tribunal halls. You almost want to smile. Almost. The festival of the supreme being, they call it, one of many new civic celebrations replacing church holidays. Today, no one is to think of saints or crosses. Instead, you watch as papier-mâché mountains are wheeled through the streets, giant effigies of liberty and reason wobbling on carts. You stand with your ledger, quill poised, recording attendance, speeches, even the weather, because everything must be noted. The irony doesn't escape you. You're supposed to chronicle joy as if it can be captured in ink. Children in tricolor sashes sing patriotic songs, their voices high and bright. You copy down the lyrics, careful not to miss a syllable. But a part of you wonders, will these same verses be banned next month if the political winds shift? Historians still argue whether such festivals were genuine attempts at uplifting morale or cynical distractions from shortages and executions. Standing here, surrounded by fake mountains and forced smiles, you lean toward the second theory. Still, you must act impressed. Everyone must. You glance at the faces in the crowd, neighbors, fellow clerks, even the baker who once threatened you with a sausage bribe. They clap along to the speeches, eyes darting sideways, checking who else claps and who doesn't. You realize your task isn't just to record festivities, it's to silently note who hesitates. If Citizen DuPont's applause arrives half a second too late, you jot it down discreetly. Tomorrow, his name might end up in a denunciation, and you'll be the one who made it official. Here's a quirky tidbit. During some of these festivals, people were ordered to release caged birds at just the right moment, symbolizing freedom. Once, someone forgot to unlatch the cage and the birds flapped helplessly, banging against the bars. The crowd pretended to cheer anyway, while the poor clerk recording the event scribbled frantically, trying to decide whether to note the blunder or gloss over it. You sympathize. You know too well the terror of writing the wrong detail. The parade winds its way past you, and you dutifully jot down the number of participants, the exact phrasing of the slogans painted on banners, and the general level of enthusiasm, which you generously rate as spirited. In truth, you can see exhaustion on every face. People march because they must. You march with your pen, copying because you must. The revolution demands joy on schedule, and you provide evidence it exists. Later, at the official ceremony, a speaker proclaims the triumph of reason over superstition. The crowd roars. You scribble his words, though your ink runs thin. You worry your lines look faint, as though you're mocking his enthusiasm. So you dip deeper, pressing harder, until your quill splinters at the tip. You quickly swap it out, praying no one noticed. In this world, even your penmanship betrays loyalty, or the lack of it. The sun climbs high and heat shimmers across the square. Children faint, women fan themselves, men sweat through their shirts, but the speeches drone on. You record them all, each phrase another pebble in your mountain of documentation. Your wrist cramps, but you keep writing, because the festival isn't over until the authorities say it's over. When at last the music ends, the crowd disperses with brittle cheer. You shuffle back to your desk, sunburned and weary, dragging behind the weight of your notes. Your supervisor beams at the pages, muttering, "Excellent detail." You know what he really means. Excellent proof that joy was compulsory, and you proved it happened. Night falls, and as you collapse onto your cot, you realize the cruel joke. Festivals are supposed to refresh the spirit, but you feel more drained than ever. Forced joy weighs heavier than fear, because at least fear is honest. You close your eyes, the echo of drums still pounding in your ears, and you dream of papier-mâché mountains collapsing on top of you, burying you in cheerful rubble. You wake before dawn, head thick as wet wool, and already rumors ripple through the corridors like smoke. One clerk whispers that Robespierre never eats meat. Another swears he once saw him faint at the sight of blood. Someone else chimes in that powdered wigs are being outlawed, then laughs nervously, tugging at his own wig as though it might strangle him by lunchtime. You shuffle to your desk, rubbing your temples, and realize gossip is the revolution's second currency, just behind bread. The office is alive with chatter. A fellow clerk hums a tune under his breath, some bawdy parody of a patriotic song, and another immediately shushes him, hissing that it could be dangerous. You can't help a small grin. It's catchy, but you hide it behind your hand. If anyone reports you for laughing at the wrong lyric, you'll find yourself on the list instead of copying it. Historians still argue whether satire helped people resist tyranny or simply gave them a false sense of control. For you, it's survival, a quick joke, a sly wink, a release valve before the paperwork swallows you whole. Your own survival tricks are small but essential. You learn to write with both hands so you can switch when one cramps. You keep an extra quill tucked in your boot in case your desk supply mysteriously disappears. And you practice a bland expression in the mirror each morning, neither too cheerful nor too gloomy, so no one can accuse you of suspicious moods. It's ridiculous, but in this world, even your eyebrows can betray you. Here's a quirky tidbit. Clerks sometimes rubbed onions on their hands to hide the smell of ink, claiming it made them less conspicuous in public. Imagine walking home reeking like a stew, but at least no one could sniff out your profession. You consider trying it yourself, though the thought of onion-stained sheets makes you wince. Mid-morning, a courier bursts in with yet another rumor disguised as fact. A nobleman escaped, disguised as a chimney sweep. Your supervisor rolls his eyes, but still orders you to copy the report, just in case. You scribble dutifully, knowing it will probably be disproven tomorrow. Still, you add it to the growing pile of urgent notices, wondering if historians centuries from now will laugh at these absurdities, or if they'll take them as gospel because your handwriting looks so official. At lunch, you sit on the steps outside with a hunk of stale bread, chewing slowly to make it last. A group nearby argues over whether someone can be guillotined for rolling their eyes during a festival speech. One man insists yes, another says no, and a third mutters that it depends on who saw you. You laugh into your crust, choking slightly because it's funny and terrifying all at once. Back inside, you stumble on a minor miracle, a spare bottle of ink hidden behind a stack of decrees. You glance around. No one seems to notice. Quickly, you slide it into your drawer. You feel like a thief, but ink is life. Without it, your pages go blank, and blank pages invite suspicion. Later, you'll probably share it with a desperate neighbor, pretending you're generous, but really, you're buying insurance. The hours drag, punctuated by whispered songs and half-believed tales. A clerk swears he heard Robespierre keeps a pet dove in his chambers. Another that Danton once ate 6 roast chickens in one sitting. The stories are absurd, but they soften the edges of reality. You jot them in the margins of scrap paper, not for the record, but for yourself, tiny reminders that even in terror, people cling to silliness. Still, the tension never loosens fully. When a supervisor enters, the room falls silent, only the scratching of quills echoing. You bow your head, pen moving, heartbeat quick. The festival joy, the rumors, the tricks, all fade when authority strides past your desk. You hold your breath until the footsteps retreat, then exhale shakily, realizing your nib has dug a hole straight through the parchment. You patch it with wax and pray no one notices. As dusk settles, you pocket your spare quill, smooth your expression, and join the trickle of clerks heading home. The streets hum with half-sung songs, the markets buzz with gossip about tomorrow's decrees, and you tread carefully, every step calculated. You've learned the game, laugh quietly, write neatly, survive one rumor at a time. But as you turn the final corner, a chill runs down your spine. A neighbor stands in the doorway, watching you too closely, eyes narrowed. You nod politely, force a bland smile, and slip inside your room. Safe, for now. Tomorrow, the rumors will swirl again, and you'll need new tricks to dodge them. Sleep quickly, you tell yourself. Dawn comes fast, and the paper pile will be waiting. The next morning, the air in Paris tastes heavier, as if even the fog has grown suspicious. You drag yourself into the office, but something is different. The chatter is muted, the glances sharper. The revolution, once loud with drums and shouts, now hums with the tension of a machine winding itself too tight. You settle at your desk, staring at the mountain of papers, yet for the first time you sense that the mountain isn't growing anymore. It's collapsing. The decrees arrive slower, but harsher. Orders to arrest former allies, to purge officials who once led parades, to rewrite records overnight. You copy them dutifully, quill trembling, realizing that the guillotine now swings in every direction. Yesterday's hero is today's traitor, and tomorrow you could be both. Historians still argue whether this collapse was inevitable, whether the revolution always devoured its own, or if it might have steadied itself under calmer hands. But you're too deep in ink to debate. You just keep writing, because stopping feels like suicide. The atmosphere in the office curdles. Clerks no longer whisper gossip. They sit stiff, silent, quills moving in mechanical unison. You hear only the scratch of nibs, the occasional cough, the faint drip of wax from guttering candles. It feels less like an office and more like a tomb. You clutch your ledger tighter, telling yourself the paper protects you, yet you know it's a lie. The records you create aren't shields, they're weapons, and sometimes they're aimed right back at you. Quirky detail. One desperate clerk once supposedly hid incriminating papers under a floorboard, only to have rats chew through them. He celebrated briefly, thinking the evidence gone, until another clerk reported the missing files, and he was denounced anyway. You shiver at the thought. Even rodents are safer in this city than you are. By midday, the rumors break. Robespierre has fallen. Or maybe he hasn't. No one knows for sure, but the streets outside erupt with shouts, bells, the clash of boots. Inside, your supervisor barks at you to copy yet another decree, this one denouncing enemies of liberty, though no one can agree on who the enemies are. You dip your quill, but the words blur on the page. If the revolution itself is collapsing, what use is another column of ink? The noise outside grows, gunfire, shouting, a riot swelling in every direction. The windows rattle. Papers scatter across your desk like panicked birds. You snatch them up, pressing them into piles, as though saving them could somehow save you. Your neighbor slams his ledger shut, muttering, "It's over." Another clerk hisses, "Write faster." No one agrees on what to do, and suddenly your desk feels less like a workstation and more like a trap. You stare at the pages you've copied. Thousands of names, thousands of decrees. They blur together into a single sea of ink, faceless and endless. You wonder if your own name has slipped into one of the lists by mistake, doomed to be read aloud tomorrow in some tribunal. You imagine your fellow clerks copying it, quills scratching just as yours has done for so many others. The thought makes your chest tighten until you can barely breathe. Outside, the drums pound louder, closer. The guillotine may stand in the square, but the revolution itself feels like it's falling blade first onto everyone. You grip your quill one last time, press it to the paper, and realize you can't write another word. Your hand won't move. Ink pools at the tip, a tiny black drop swelling until it falls, staining the page like a final punctuation mark. And then, slowly, the sound fades. Not because the city grows calmer, but because exhaustion muffles everything. Your body sinks against the desk, head heavy, eyes closing. For weeks you've fought with paper, with ink, with suspicion. But now you can't fight anymore. The revolution may spiral, the crowds may rage, but you are simply done. The quill slips from your fingers at last, rolling across the desk. Its faint clatter, the softest sound in a city that never seemed to rest. Your eyes flutter shut, and in that darkness, the weight of paper, names, and endless decrees begins to drift away like smoke dissolving into the night air. You breathe slower now, deeper, as if each breath untangles one more knot of worry wound tight around your chest. Outside, the echoes of drums and shouts soften into something distant, like waves lapping at a shore far away. The guillotine, the mobs, the endless ledgers, each fades, leaving only the quiet hum of your own heartbeat. You no longer see the candlelight flickering against the stacks of parchment, or the stern glances of supervisors, or the sharp edge of suspicion in every shadow. Instead, you imagine soft moonlight spilling across calm fields, the sky wide and gentle, no lists, no signatures, no accusations waiting there. Your body loosens in the chair, shoulders releasing their ache, hands unclenching after so many cramped hours. The world that demanded constant vigilance slowly lets you go, allowing space for stillness. The sounds of Paris blur into a low lullaby, indistinct, harmless, carrying you further away from the sharp edges of history. And so, as you sink deeper into rest, the revolution fades behind you, not erased, not forgotten, but distant enough that its noise can no longer reach you. Only the quiet remains, the calm night embracing you like a blanket. You are safe here, outside the ledgers, outside the tribunals, outside the fear. Just stillness, just rest. Sleep well, dream softly, and let the night carry you.